Want to start with a Fox News alert. President-elect Trump's rally in Orlando, Florida, about to kick off at any minute. As always, you'll see it right here live as soon as he takes a stage. But right now, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Today, the FBI announced it is backing the CIA's assessment that Russian hackers did help Donald Trump win the presidency. And in just 3 days, members of the Electoral College will officially cast their ballots to elect the next president of the United States. Some of those electors are demanding to hear intelligence briefings before casting their votes. One of those pushing for a briefing is Brett Chafalo. He's a Democrat and an elector from Washington State. Thanks a lot for joining us, Brett.
Thanks for having me again, Tucker.
As I understand it, not simply asking for a briefing, and I think all of us would like to know more about what the intel shows or what the analysis. Though a Democrat elector, you are not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. And moreover, you're going to try to encourage Republican electors, your fellow electors, not to vote for Trump in an effort to take the election away from Trump. Am I characterizing that correctly?
That's about right.
That's about right. So the obvious question is, what gives you the right to do that?
Well, I think as an American citizen and an elected elector, I have the right to discuss these grave issues with all the other electors. We're not trying to demand that they do anything. We're trying to give them the support and the information they may need to make a decision that they may want to make on their own. A lot of Republican electors have told us about grave concerns they have about Donald Trump's fitness for presidency.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but you haven't answered my question where that right comes from. I mean, you're an American citizen. Of course you have a right to your opinion and a right to discuss it, but you're not just expressing your opinion. You're trying to affect the outcome, the final outcome of a presidential election in which tens of millions of people voted. And you are, in effect, saying that we, as the 538 electors, have a right to change the result of the election. And my question, again, is where did you get that right? You said you were elected by whom? I didn't vote for you.
Well, I mean, you asked for, the people of Washington did. When people go out and vote for president, they're actually voting for a slate of electors. That's clear in the Constitution, and that's really where I get my right. The Constitution, the instructions the Founding Fathers left for us regarding the Electoral College.
Right.
It's our responsibility to stop someone who we believe is completely unfit for the presidency, who may be a demagogue and may be connected to foreign powers, to stop that person from becoming president.
So you actually answered my question, but not in the way you thought. You were not elected by the people of the state of Washington. You were elected by a political party, not in a popular election, but with a very small number of voters. The voters of the state of Washington gave you the power to do their will, which was to see Hillary Clinton elected. And yet you're going to ignore that and vote for someone else. Now, I'm not a Hillary Clinton fan, but I just love to know why you think you have the right to ignore your whole purpose for being there.
Well, to be fair, I don't think I'm ignoring it. I've taken everything everyone has had to say through this process and considered it. That being said, at the end of the day, we have to go back to the Constitution. The Constitution does not mention the popular vote at all in any situation. And therefore, the presidential election has not happened yet. It happens on December 19th. The election of slates of electors are what has already happened. And I realize that it angers a lot of Americans that it doesn't feel like it's democratic. And frankly, on December 20th, I might join them in trying to get rid of the Electoral College. That being said, right now, we have to follow the law of the land. And for me, that's the Constitution. And I am trying to support it and respect it the best I know how.
But that's just silly. I mean, the Constitution does not suggest that you should vote in the way that you are. It doesn't say anything about that at all, as you know, in Article 2, nor in the 12th Amendment. So you're just kind of freelancing. No group of electors has ever handed the presidency to someone other than the winner of the Electoral College. So this is totally without precedent. And again, you don't have the authority that I can see. If a cop pulls me over and says, I'm arresting you, I can say, where does your authority derive from? And he said, from the state. I'm employed by the state. Your authority comes from a political party. The founders didn't anticipate that. The Constitution doesn't mention it. You don't have the authority to go against the will of the country unless you have an authority I don't know about, which would be what?
Well, and I respectfully disagree. When you look at Federalist 68 and you look at what Alexander Hamilton said about the Electoral College, he made it clear what was in the Founding Fathers' minds when they created the system. And there have not been significant changes since then. Therefore, that's what I have to look to when I look to take instructions about what my duties are. And I take them very, very seriously.
Have you read Federalist 68?
Many times. Many times.
Carefully. Okay, then you might remember this line. One of the purposes of the Electoral College, and I'm quoting now, is to afford as little opportunity as possible to tumult and disorder. It was designed by Hamilton to prevent situations like the one you are trying to cause, where people wake up and they find that the president they thought was the president is no longer the president, thanks to people like you who are elected by nobody, and we have tumult and disorder. I mean, you're trying to create exactly what he hoped to avoid.
We are not trying to create tumult or disorder. What we're trying to do is, as a good example is our vigilsforamerica.com, we're trying to bring unity vigils to all across the country on the 18th and 19th to bring the Republicans and Democrats of this country, who are so divided right now, together around a leader that we can all support. So we're trying to unify the country, not divide it.
But didn't we just have an election to answer these questions? I mean, again, I hate to go back to fundamentals and keep asking variations of the same question, but maybe these were things that we should have discussed before the election. And I wonder what you think the consequences would be for the country if people found out that they actually had no power to choose their own leaders. People would go crazy, wouldn't they? And for good reason, right?
Well, I can't predict how people would react, but
now.
The fact is the Constitution very clearly states that it doesn't mention the popular vote at all. So given that, any assumption that the people have the power to elect the president directly is a complete misnomer.
Wait, but you're confusing me with respect. I mean, I think you've thought about this. I think you're, trying to do your best. But you just said a second ago that after all this is over, you're going to support the abolition of the Electoral College. But before then,
very well might.
You're okay. So you're against the Electoral College, but you're citing its existence as a justification for what you're about to do. I'm confused. Are you for the Electoral College, or are you against it? Are you for democracy, or are you for an electoral system?
I am for following the rule of law as it stands right now, and that's the Constitution. If we as a country choose to amend the Constitution in the future, that is a completely different situation. Because the bottom line is, the Constitution has to guide us now. I'm following the Constitution, and maybe after the 20th, I may attempt to try to get a constitutional amendment to change it. Just because I don't like something in the Constitution doesn't mean I don't have to follow it.
Okay, and just to be totally clear, you are doing something that is permitted by the Constitution, but is not specified in the Constitution. The Constitution makes no reference at all to the motives of electors, makes no reference to their conscience at all. And by its omission, you're assuming you have the right, and you may be right. The Supreme Court has never ruled on this that specifically, right? So here's my question. You say that you describe yourself as a moral elector. The suggestion appears to be that people who are following the will of the states they represent are somehow immoral.
I don't think that's fair. If their moral compasses have them tell them that they need to vote for the general election winner in that state, then that's fine. That's their moral compass. When I looked at this situation and deliberated and investigated, I came to this conclusion. And I feel very comfortable ethically, legally, and morally in the decisions I've made.
Obviously you do. And I just want to make it clear that you are a Democrat. You are, in effect, pledged to Hillary Clinton. And if she had won the election and there were, a bunch of Democrats saying we're going to try to put Bernie Sanders in or whatever, I would be against that. This is not a matter of flacking for Trump. It's a matter of recognizing the instability that might result from what you're doing. So that's my point. Anyway, Brett, thanks a lot for coming on and explaining it. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Donald Trump's speaking tour takes us to Orlando, Florida tonight. We expect him to take the stage at any minute, and of course we'll go there. But as we wait, we're going to go to Phil Keating, who is live at that venue, which is outdoors, being Florida. Phil?
Hi, Tucker. One of the two Florida chairmen of the Trump campaign, revving the crowd here behind me. And I tell you, this crowd is just enormously enthusiastic. Many of these people, hundreds of them, have been here for more than 6 and 9 hours. I'd say the crowd size is about 5,000 people here. Donald Trump is running behind. He flew Trump Force One down to Palm Beach, dropped off the family, then flew to Orlando. And we have learned that they have touched down in Orlando, give another 35 minutes of traffic to get here. So probably closer to 8 o'clock, 7:45 is when President-elect Trump is expected to take the stage. You see the Christmas trees behind me. That's definitely the theme, the holiday spirit, and it does look like Donald Trump will be spending the holidays in Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach County from here all the way to January 3rd, which means there's air restrictions and boating restrictions around his resort. Themes we expect to hear from Trump, as he has in 7 other thank you rallies, are campaign themes like drop taxes, lower business taxes, lower corporate taxes, personal income taxes, increase enforcement of existing immigration laws and beef them up, do a better job of screening immigrants who may have sympathies to terror, and of course, I guarantee you will hear him get this crowd screaming when he says, "We will build that wall." He's making that promise at every one of these rallies. So this is the 8th, perhaps the biggest thank you rally, because it was for Florida, the biggest battleground state, and the 29 electoral college votes that Trump was supposed to get. If he was going to have any chance on winning, he got them, and that led to what happened election night when swing state after swing state all went towards Trump. Tucker?
Thanks a lot, Phil. Appreciate it. He's now one of the actors in that video, Mike Farrell, former star of MASH and a bunch of other popular TV shows. Mike, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
So, as I understand, if my math is right, you're asking that 37 Republican electors change their vote and vote against Trump, and that would override the votes of over 62 million people. So you're saying the votes of 37 people are more important than the votes of 62 million people. That does not sound like democracy to me.
Does the Electoral College sound like democracy to you when the popular vote is the so-called winner is now 2.5 million votes below his opponent?
No, that's a completely fair point. No, I agree with you. No, but I agree with you on that. Mm-hmm. It's not a perfectly democratic system, but what you're proposing makes it far less democratic, doesn't it?
I'm not so sure it does. No, I don't think it does at all. All we're doing is suggesting to those people who are electors, appointed electors, Republican electors, that they should have the right, if they have a view that is contrary to the decision that has been made by the electorate, that they do what is available to them, which is to simply vote their conscience. John Kasich, for example, Governor Kasich, for example, would be the choice, it seems to me, of a great many of them had they been able to make that choice. And because there are concerns, I think, across the board, in whether Democrat or Republican, there are concerns about the advisability of having a President Trump, and those concerns grow by the day as we see the appointments he's making, as we see the fact that he doesn't yet release the tax statements or tax records that he claimed he would. I mean, there are just any number of things that are happening that are raising people's questions, and it seems to me that the Electoral College has an opportunity, sort of a court of last resort, to say this may not be the right choice and leave it up to the House of Representatives.
Right. I mean, I understand what you're saying. The problem is, and perhaps Governor Kasich would be a better president, I don't know, but nobody voted for Governor Kasich. And even though it's not, as you noted, a perfect democracy, but in the general election, he received basically no votes. I mean, maybe some people wrote him in, but he wasn't on the ballot. And so would you really want a president nobody voted for? I mean, that's not legitimate presidency, is it?
Well, legitimate's an interesting word in these days, but I would prefer, personally, yes, to have a president that the House of Representatives voted for, or the Electoral College voted for, that was an experienced person with integrity, with an understanding of public service, with a proven ability to guide not only a country but a state or some political organization. Mr. Trump has none of those things. Mr. Trump is a businessman, as we all know, and a celebrity, and I don't think those are qualifying. Personally, I don't find those to be particularly qualifying.
Right, you don't like Trump, I get it. That's legitimate, but liberals used to
I've never met him. I don't dislike him. I find him scary.
You don't want to be president. I understand that. Lots of people share your view. But liberals used to believe in democracy and that legitimacy was conferred by the people who live in the country. Only they can choose their leaders. That's what we used to tell our children children. Maybe one of the reasons Hillary lost in the first place is that rich people, including you, no longer believe that. They think that we should pick someone I like, and it doesn't matter how we pick him, we're just going to pick him and he'll be great. I mean, that is the message that you were sending, isn't it?
No, let me demur about the rich people. I am not one of them. Rich people made a decision, and that decision was to put a man who described himself as the richest billionaire in the country into office, and they used all kinds of weapons that are available to them to convince people that he was the guy.
Hillary was the choice of people making upper income, and he received almost no support from the tech community, from the finance community. I mean,
the tech community,
she spent twice as much as he spent. She had the support of rich people. Okay, well, it's
absolutely.
Kind of
she spent a great deal more than he did, no question about it. And she was not my candidate, frankly, but that's not my point. My point is we the people, through the process that is currently in place, have made the president-elect a man who has no qualifications for the office, has demonstrated that he has no qualifications for the office, and has demonstrated his own inability to be a leader in any number of ways that are, I think, very disturbing. But not only disturbing to me, disturbing to many people in this country, and disturbing to a lot of people around the world.
Well, sometimes voters do things you don't like, but you have to live with it. That's kind of the point.
That's
now, in the video, it says this. This is to the electors that the video is aimed at. It says, the American people trust that your voice speaks for us all. These electors, the 538 or the 30 or the 37 that you want to change their votes. Who are these people? Do you know anything about the electors whom you believe should make this most important decision in the world? Do you know anything about them personally, about their wisdom, their backgrounds, their names even?
I only know the ones who have said that they won't vote for President Trump and why they won't vote for President Trump. I know none of them personally. I understand that they've taken a job, and I assume there's an oath associated with the job they've taken, and bless them for it. And they are committed Republicans, and bless them for that. And I think that the issue that is before them was, I think the point of the creation of the Electoral College was to avoid having an unqualified person serve in the office, to be careful, to see to it that the appropriate person is the one that ultimately reaches that chair.
But why do you assume that this tiny group of people is better qualified to make this decision than 62 million voters? Why do you believe that if you don't even know their names, why do you think they're wiser or imbued with a keener moral sense to make this decision that will affect all of us? I'm confused.
A larger number of voters said that the other candidate was the better one. I'm not arguing that we should take that other candidate. I'm saying that there was a very serious debate in the country, and the one who lost the debate in terms of the numbers is the one who has now been selected. And that person, I believe, is not qualified, and he's demonstrated that he's not qualified, and he's not been honest. He's not been straightforward. He's not been appropriately revealing about himself, his intentions, his standing, his I could go on if you'd like, but
no. I get the point. You don't want him to be president. I mean, but I think the process matters here, I guess, is the point. Right. And if we were to, being whoever makes these decisions, were to snatch the presidency from Donald Trump, I think you would have a great deal of social instability. Has that occurred? Like, what would the 62 million people who voted for him think? Okay.
I think they'd be unhappy, certainly.
Yeah.
No, of course they would be. Yeah, but that's not the point. The 68 million or however many that voted for Hillary Clinton are unhappy too. But I think everybody will be happier ultimately when a qualified person sits in the office. I think when we have somebody doing the kind of work that he claimed outside that he was going to do, and now demonstrates that he's going to do some very different things, I think that's a source of concern for many people, even the ones who voted for him.
Mike Farrell joining us. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
You bet it.
And now it's time for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most powerful weather patterns. Tonight, a wave of bad business decisions is roasting the New York Times. In a memo to its staff, executives at the newspaper announced that company will be vacating at least 8 floors of its Manhattan headquarters in order to, quote, generate significant rental income. They're letting rooms, as they used to say. Of course, Twitter was not impressed. First up, Evelyn B. Hall wrote this. Did Clinton's check bounce, or is she withholding her money until she gets into office? Ooh, good question. Lee Sherman wrote, will they rename the square if they go down? Untimely Square, No Time Square, Hard Time Square. Ooh, we can hope. Deplorable John wrote this. Carrier is hiring if they want a real job saved by Trump. And Michael Costanza tweeted, what floor are they assigning to fake news? Good question. Finally, Matt Musson said, quote, in 20 years, the New York Times staff will consist of 2 middle-aged women posting on Facebook, which will be different from now. How exactly? That's tonight's Twitter storm. Next up, President Obama's campaign slogan was hope and change. The change definitely happened, but Michelle Obama says the hope is all gone. That's coming up. Plus, Donald Trump continues his tour of America tonight in Orlando, Florida. His plane has landed. We're waiting for him to take the stage. Stay tuned. We're still waiting for the president-elect to speak in Orlando, Florida. He's got a big outdoor venue, lots of people there. He just stepped off his plane. You're seeing the pictures and should be there very soon. Of course, we'll go live the second he takes the stage. Meanwhile, you just heard 2 stories about people wanting electors, they'll be voting on Monday, by the way, to flip their votes and deny Trump the presidency. We're all sort of assuming, oh, that's crazy. But could it actually happen? Joining us now, Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and Mercedes Schlapp, columnist at the Washington Times. Great to see you both. Mercedes, Byron, we were just talking about this in the commercial break, and you were agreeing with me, Mercedes, I think, that if you look back over the last year, all the times you've heard all the smart people say that never happened, no way, and then, of course, it did. Why are we assuming that the presidency couldn't be taken from Trump on Monday?
Well, because we're in such an unsettling time. The mere fact that these electors are putting pressure, lobbying the other electors to change their decision, or to say, basically, I'm not going to be voting for Hillary Clinton. Let's make sure Donald Trump doesn't get the presidency. It's unnerving, Tucker, and it sets a dangerous precedent because of the mere fact that you have lawsuits going on in Colorado, which, of course, the judge did not agree with these electors, trying to change the way the electoral system works.
Right.
And so I find that I find that the fact that they're putting this unnecessary pressure, they're harassing electors, they're emailing them, making phone calls, death threats. This is not what the American system is about. No. I clearly remember when we were transferring power from Bush to Obama. It was a peaceful transition. There is no need for this unnecessary stress on our electoral college system. And what we're seeing is that the Democrats are pushing this forward, led by also, not only are we talking about Nancy Pelosi's daughter, but you're talking about the Clinton campaign being involved. Sure. You're talking about President Obama pushing forward the story on the Russian hacking influencing
And it's not accidental.
Election.
I mean, these are sophisticated people. I know a lot of these people, and they're not stupid. And I don't think they're doing this for no reason. Do you, Byron?
No, but I mean, we think this won't happen because it never has happened.
Exactly.
And it hasn't gotten close to happening. The most electors who've ever been faithless was in 1808. There were 6 of them. Every time after that, it's been an elector here, an elector there. There was one in 2004 who was a John Kerry elector.
It was accidental.
And who voted for John Edwards instead. And in 2000, extremely contentious election, one elector, a Democrat, just abstained. So it hadn't happened before, hasn't been close to happening. Also, there are these laws, which you reference, in 29 states that bind electors to vote for the popular vote winner in their state. So that makes it difficult. And finally, you look at this Hamilton electors group that your earlier guest was from. They say they've got a lot of electors who want to do this. The number of Republican electors they have right now is 1.
That's right.
So there's 20 Democrats who say, well, I'd vote for a Republican if 37 Republicans would go away from Trump. Well, now they have 1. So it just doesn't look very
good. No, it doesn't. But I also think that we undervalue political stability. Our economy, our civil society, it's all built on the strata of a stable political system.
Absolutely.
And when you start trying to undermine it, and it's not just the Democrats, but they are the movers of this, like, you're really reckless, I think.
And it's not only just undermining it. It's the mere fact that they're making a moral decision. These electors who are basically saying we can't move forward with Donald Trump being president is the fact that they don't want to listen to the millions of voters who did vote for Donald Trump in these states, and they want to be the ones to make the moralistic call because they believe that Donald Trump is unqualified to be president. That is... I just find it just so disturbing.
But you're leaving an ingredient out of the recipe, and it's this, Byron. there are a lot of celebrities in Hollywood who want this to happen.
Right.
And that is kind of the definitive factor we know in elections, isn't it, what the celebrities want?
Well, this was a pre-existing cause. It existed before the whole Russia thing happened. But what did happen is they were up and running. They had their one elector defector. And then on Sunday, with the news of the Russian hacks, they thought, wow, we've got to have a briefing.
That's right. No, and thank you for that reminder. We got to go to break.
Onto that.
We will be back. Please stay. Up next, First Lady Michelle Obama opens up about her husband's presidency, and for the first time since Election Day, she's talking about the next administration. You can imagine what she had to say, but we'll play it for you in case you missed it. Plus, President-elect Trump, as we said, about to speak in Orlando. We'll be there, as we always are, so stay tuned for that. Well, we're still waiting for the president-elect to come to Orlando, Florida, where thousands await his speech in an open-air arena. The second he arrives, of course, we'll take it live for you. Meanwhile, some of the left are not feeling happy. They're not sitting in an outdoor arena waiting for the president. They are despondent, and that would include First Lady Michelle Obama, who just sat down with Oprah to explain her sadness.
Your husband's administration, everything, the election, was all about hope. Do you think that this administration achieved that?
Yes, I do, because we feel the difference now.
Yeah.
See, now we're feeling what not having hope feels like. You know, hope is necessary. It's a necessary concept. And Barack didn't just talk about hope because he thought it was just a nice slogan to get votes. I mean, he and I and so many believe that what else do you have if you don't have hope?
Yeah. Well, that's really the question, since we no longer have hope, according to the First Lady. Joining us now is Democratic strategist Jessica Tarloff. Ms. Tarloff, great to see you tonight. So here's my question. Here's the obvious question. So Michelle Obama sees her husband elected and tells us she's proud of her country for the first time. Now she sees his legacy repudiated, as it just was, in November, and she says hope is gone. The message appears to be Barack Obama is the country, and the country's fortunes rise and fall with his. This is a cult of personality she's describing, not a republic.
Well, President Obama actually is a cult of personality. When you look at his approval rating, upwards of 55%, and the fact that everyone else in government is distrusted and disliked, she's right. I mean, Barack Obama stands alone here, and right now he's overwhelmingly popular. And I think that she felt it was necessary to make this argument that she was making on the campaign trail throughout this. You know, she went out there and stumped for Hillary Clinton, who, you know, I don't think I'm revealing a big secret here. I don't think she's a massive fan of, naturally, you know, after what went on in 2008. And she went out there to make sure that her husband's legacy was going to be cemented. And as you said, now it's going to be completely repudiated by someone who was a leading figure in the birther movement. So I understand why she's not feeling particularly hopeful right now.
But she didn't just say that she doesn't feel hopeful. She said the country doesn't feel hopeful. And I guess this is just yet another, this is example 437 this week, of the Democratic unwillingness to come to terms with what just happened. So her husband's approval rating is above 50, you noted. It's not stratospheric, but it's better than he deserves. But if people loved the president so much and his policies so much, why did Hillary Clinton just lose? She was running as a third term.
She was running as a third term, not only his third term, but also her husband's third term, and that's incredibly difficult. If you look throughout history, it's almost impossible to win a third term, even for one guy, even one great guy, and we have two here. So I think that that's just flat out difficult, but as we've talked about before, this was a change election. You know, the second part of Barack Obama's slogan, hope and change, and Americans wanted that. People all over the world want that right now, and it obviously wasn't the right time, and I won't go so far to say as it was the wrong candidate, because when you lose by just 80,000 votes, I think we could have tinkered with the campaign program, you know, sent her more to Michigan and Wisconsin, less to Arizona and Georgia, and then, you know, we'd be waiting for Hillary Clinton at that open-air auditorium, and I'd be thrilled.
Because there's always a technocratic solution. Just read more papers, let's bring an Ira Magaziner and reverse engineer. So, but I would say two things. First, this current First Lady has gotten a pass for 8 years. She said a lot of really nasty, divisive, and political things, and no one calls her on it, and that's frustrating to me in the press. But what's most frustrating is when she says, as she did today, that her husband's a grown-up. The suggestion is that Trump and his supporters are not. Isn't this exactly the attitude that lost Hillary Clinton the election? The idea that if you disagree with me, you're not fully a citizen, an adult, a sentient being. I'm going to infantilize you, pat you on the head, tell you to go away.
I think it's a very smart argument to be making. I think that we were hurt dramatically by the PC police argument and that deplorables comment. It resonated really well with the left, but there are a lot of people out there that took issue with it, and I thought it was a mistake to make it, and certainly to attach a number to say 50% or more. So I think that you're right there. Michelle Obama, though, has an overwhelmingly high approval rating as well. I think it's 66% currently, and as you know, she was the best on the campaign trail.
Fawning profile. Why? You know what I mean? Like, people kind of believe what they're told.
Right.
I mean, has there ever been a tough piece on Michelle Obama? Ever? I mean, I'm not even sure it's legal for me to ask that question. I may be pulled away in the middle of this segment. You can't criticize her.
Oh, really? Can I host the rest of the show then? I'll do the rally coverage.
We're locking the doors. But I mean, there's been a lot of, and I'm not saying, you shouldn't attack a president's wife or a candidate's wife, but if that person is an active participant in politics, you can, right?
Well, I think that if someone is dealing in issues, there's always ample room there to criticize and to discuss. I think that it's been terrible how Melania Trump has been treated, certainly in contrast, the whole thing about how designers won't dress her and going after her personally. She doesn't really seem like she wants to be there anyway, and she got yanked into this thing in the first place. And we could, in a whole other segment about going on about the racial tensions issue and what it would be like to criticize Michelle Obama versus somebody else. So I take your point there. I will have to find a hard-hitting piece on Michelle Obama and her character and things that she said. I think it exists. I'll get back to you.
You know what? It's a little like the missing link. It's got to exist because science suggests it does, but we haven't found it yet. $20 to you if you do. Jessica Tarlock, thanks a lot for joining
us.
Thanks,
Tucker.
Appreciate it. Well, here's something new. An anti-Trump Republican elector is facing allegations that he lied in a big way about being a first responder on 9/11. According to a report from WFAA television, Texas elector Christopher Supran claimed to be one of the first firemen on the scene at the burning Pentagon on the day of the attacks. But an investigation discovered Supran wasn't hired as a fireman until October of 2001, a month later. And in any case, his fire department didn't even respond to the Pentagon attacks. Well, Supran appeared on this program last week to talk about his refusal to vote for Trump. If you missed it, here's part of it. You describe yourself, and I think I'm quoting, as a moral elector. You're suggesting that people who are voting for Trump in the Electoral College 2 weeks from now are immoral?
No, I'm saying I'm taking a conscious decision to consider who I'm voting for. I don't think Donald Trump meets the test to be qualified to be president.
Well, despite intense and growing criticism, Supran is standing by his story, as improbable as the story now sounds. He claims he was a member of another fire department in Virginia at the time. And, of course, we'll bring you updates on this fascinating story as we get them. We'll get those parkas and boots ready. Snow and frigid temperatures are coming. Who better to tell us about them than the great Janice Dean? Plus, she goes into the friend zone with details about her past you would never guess. They're a little shocking, to be honest. And President-elect Trump expected to speak in Orlando very soon. The plane's on the ground, motorcade on its way. We're taking it live. Don't depart. Time now for the Friend Zone, one of our favorite segments where we invite our friends from within the building here at Fox onto the show. And tonight we are joined by the permanently effervescent and awesome Janice Dean, the weather machine. Janice, I never hold you responsible for temperatures, but I may have to break the rule because it is cold. Is it cold everywhere?
Well, yes. The dreaded, what they call the polar vortex, which has been there since the beginning of the atmosphere. But sometimes part of that polar vortex comes and visits us here in the U.S., and that's what's happening right now. We've got very cold temperatures, especially for December. We're actually flirting with record temperatures, record lows. So we've got this large upper-level circulation. This has always been there, called the polar vortex, and sometimes some of that cold air breaks off and influences our weather here in the lower 48, and that's exactly what's happening right now. And the dangerous part of this, Chucker, is the wind chills. So wind chills, minus 20, minus 30 degrees. That's got people nervous, obviously, and you should need to be indoors. Yeah. You need to be checking on the elderly and making sure your kids are inside where it's warm. The other part of this is we've got a big winter storm that is going to affect travel not only today, but Saturday and Sunday. So people need to be aware of this because 38 states are currently under winter weather advisories. So this is going to be a big deal. Not only snow, we could see severe weather tomorrow across the southern states and freezing rain and ice. So delays at the airports, cancellations. It's going to be happening. I know a lot of people are traveling, so just pay attention to your local
May I just ask you a quick
forecasters.
question before I get to the personal stuff?
Of course.
Is polar vortex a legitimate meteorological term, or is it just something that we use in TV?
Yes, it's been there since the beginning of the atmosphere. If you look into the AMS digests, polar vortex has always been there. It got popular in 2014 when one of our fellow meteorologists brought it up, and it was a catchphrase and it caught on. But I think it was misused a little bit because it was like the polar vortex is coming to eat the U.S. and it's always been there. So that's, we use it. I like to use it, but properly. It's a little bit of the polar vortex that's always been there since the beginning of the atmosphere.
So it's real, unlike, say, Superstorm.
Well, that's another segment.
No, I know, that's another segment. So I know from working with you for many years that you were not always a meteorologist. You had another career before that. What was it for our Jeopardy segment tonight?
Yes, I was a classic rock DJ. Actually, I've done a lot of DJing in my days right out of college. There I am with the hair and not a lot of makeup. But, right out of college, I had a professor who was at the local rock station there. And he thought I would be a great community events reporter. And this is my community events reporter days. Things like, teddy bear picnics and poutine eating contests in Canada. So this is what I did in my early 20s. And unbelievably, I got to meet these rock stars because I decided I didn't want to just be a community events reporter. I wanted to get on the air and play some tunes and some Led Zeppelin and Peter Frampton and Aerosmith. So I got to meet all of these rock stars, and it was such a great experience. It was, listen, my job here at Fox is the coolest job I've ever had. But back then in my 20s, being, a classic rock DJ, meeting all of these great rock stars, that was cool too. But I have to say, being with you on the Friend Zone, Tucker Carlson, that beats everything.
It's a highlight for me. You are walking amphetamine for me.
I adore you. And congratulations on this. You're doing so well in the ratings, and I am so appreciative of you and your support over the years. I adore you and your wife and your whole family.
Well, thank you, Janice. And you've just confirmed that people do, in fact, eat poutine, which I appreciate.
Oh, yes, we do.
That.
I will bring some. It's
details,
really
please.
Good.
Have fun at your Christmas party tonight.
I love
Thank you, Janice. You're
Merry
the best.
Christmas.
Thank you. President-elect getting ready to step up to the microphone in Orlando, Florida. We'll take you there as soon as he does. Don't go away. The president-elect about to head on the stage in Orlando, Florida. He's running a little behind tonight. We'll go there live when he does. And his former opponent, Hillary Clinton, is busy describing why she thinks she lost. Here's what she said today. Listen.
Swing state voters made their decisions in the final days, breaking against me because of the FBI letter from Director Comey. But we're also learning more every day about the unprecedented Russian plot to swing this election. As the latest reports made clear, Vladimir Putin himself directed the covert cyber attacks against our electoral system, against our democracy, apparently because he has a personal beef against me.
It was about me. Here now, Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and Mercedes Schlapp, columnist at the Washington Times. It is never about them. Okay, so it's interesting to hear, Mercedes, we're apparently at war with Russia now, according to the president. We're taking action, some unspecified action. Russia is responsible for all bad things. But it was just 3 years ago, October of 2013, Hillary Clinton gave a speech uncovered by WikiLeaks in which she said this: Putin is engaging, he's an interesting conversationalist. She's hoping to have a more positive relationship with Russia if elected president. And then, quote this, we don't believe there will be a threat from Russia. So these people can't stand up now and say, you know what? Russia is the single most important threat to the United States. They didn't feel that way before the election.
And let me add one more thing. Back in October, it was Vice President Biden in an interview with NBC Meet the Press who said that Russia will not be influenced. He was convinced, he said, we are not concerned that Russia will fundamentally interfere with the election. This was back in October, Tucker. So the mere fact that they're saying that Hillary Clinton is blaming Russia, blaming Putin, blaming Comey, can she look within herself and basically say my messaging of name-calling, identity politics, divisiveness didn't work? My political strategy failed in battleground states like Wisconsin? instead of just saying it was the Russians' fault.
And I didn't have a real economic message. What bothers me about this, though, Byron, is that what started as a form of displacement, we got to blame someone, let's blame the Russians, has taken on a kind of momentum of its own, and all of a sudden, we're taking actual and yet still unspecified action against a foreign country. Like, this is starting to get scary.
And Washington will be consumed with this well past the Trump inauguration. There's an important context for this, though. A good piece in Politico a couple of days ago talking about big Democratic donors who'd given a lot of money to Hillary Clinton. They're pushing hard for an autopsy of this campaign to see what went wrong. She obviously could not reassemble the Obama coalition. She could not appeal to the sort of white working class voters that went for Trump. I mean, she lost Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin in kind of a historic way for a Democrat. She personally dismantled the blue wall, and they want to find out what happened. And it's clear that Hillary Clinton is in the mood to just blame Putin and James Comey. But that's not going to fly with the people who actually gave her money.
I think you're absolutely, and we should just specify that Putin is different from poutine, which is a dish popular in Canada, but both are hard on the digestion.
In two segments, that's good.
At this moment. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Coming up, you choose the news. We asked you to tweet at Tucker Carlson or email us at tuckercarlson@foxnews.com. Stories that you thought were being ignored by the press and shouldn't be. Well, we didn't ignore you. We'll tell you what you sent and what we're doing about it. Plus, any minute now, Trump is going to speak in Orlando. You'll see it live right here. Time now for You Choose the News. We asked you to tell us what stories we ought to be covering that are being ignored by the press. Tonight's winning submission comes from Kathleen McIntyre, who sent us this about Facebook's crackdown on fake news. Here's the story. Facebook just unveiled a new system to suss out fake content from its news feed. We can debate what fake is. That's kind of the whole point. The social media site is partnering with third-party fact checkers at ABC News, factcheck.com, the Associated Press, and Snopes, as well as PolitiFact, to evaluate user-flagged content. Stories deemed fake will appear lower in the news feed and be accompanied by a disputed content warning and a link to an article explaining why. There are a lot of questions about this. Can you trust the fact checkers would be the first. Kathleen, we can tell you we're working to get you more in the story. Heat Street writer William Hicks will join us Monday to talk about Facebook's ability to police fake news objectively, and there will be more interviews after that. Facebook is the single most important arbiter of information in the history of language, and so this is worth paying attention to. On Monday, our segment News Abuse is back. Have you seen an egregious example of media dumbness or bias? Of course you have. A ludicrous segment on television or headline? Yes. Send your evidence to us. You know the addresses. That's it for tonight. We are really glad to see you. Have a fantastic weekend. Donald Trump up next.